To the Comptia Network Plus course. There is no way around it. Troubleshooting computers and networks is a combination of art and science. The only way to really get good at it is by doing it. So it's practice, practice and practice with the basic yet vitally important skills you'll attain in this chapter. Of course, I'm going to cover all the troubleshooting topics you'll need to sail through the Network Plus exam, but I'm also going to add some juicy bits of knowledge that will really help you tackle the task of troubleshooting successfully in the real world. First, you'll learn to check quickly for problems in the super simple stuff category, and then we'll move into the hearty discussion about a common troubleshooting model that you can use like a checklist to go through and solve a surprising number of network problems. We'll finish the chapter with a good briefing about some common troubleshooting resources, tools, tips and tricks to keep up your sleeve and equip you even further. I won't be covering any new networking information in this chapter because you've gotten all the fundamental background material you need for troubleshooting in the previous chapters. I'll go through each of the issues described in this chapter's objectives one at a time in detail, so that even if you still got a bit of that previous material to nail down yet, you will be good to get going and fix some networks anyway. Narrowing down the problem. When initially faced with a network problem in its entirety, it's easy to get totally overwhelmed. That's why it's a great strategy to start by narrowing down things to the source of the problem. To help you achieve the goal, it's always wise to ask the right questions. You can begin doing so just that with this list of questions to ask yourself. Did you check the super simple stuff? SSS. Is hardware or software causing the problem? Is it a workstation or server problem? Which segments of the network are affected? Are there any cabling issues? The correct login procedure and rights. You know by now that if you've set up everything correctly, your network users absolutely have to follow the proper login procedure to the letter or number or symbol in order to successfully gain access to the network resources thereafter. If they don't do that, they will be denied access, and considering that there are truly tons of opportunities to bloat, it's a miracle, or at least very special, that anyone manages to log into the network correctly at all. Think about it. First, a user must enter their username and password flawlessly. Sounds easy, but as they say in a perfect world, in this one people mess up, don't realize it, and freak out at you about the broken network or the imaginary IT demon that changed their password on them while they were on lunch and now they can't log in. The latter could be true. You may have done exactly that. If you did, just gently remind them about that memo you sent about the upcoming password change date and time. They must have spaced about due to the tremendous demands on them. Anyway, it's true. By far the most common problem is bad typing. People accidentally enter the wrong username and password, and they do that a lot. With some operating systems, a slight brush of the cap lock key is all it takes. The user's name and password are case sensitive, and suddenly they're trying to log in with it now all in uppercase instead. Plus, if you happen to be running one of the shiny new operating systems around today, you can also restrict the times and conditions under which the users can log in, right? So if your user spent an unusual amount of time in the bathroom upon returning from lunch, or they got distracted and tried to log in from their BFF's workstation instead of their own, the network operating system would have rejected their login request even though they can still type impressively well after 2 martinis. And remember, you can also restrict how many times a user can log into the network simultaneously. If you have that set up and your user tries to establish more connections than you allowed, access will again be denied. Just know that most of the time, if a user is denied access to the network and or its resources, they're probably going to interpret that as a network problem, even though the network operating system is doing what it should be. Let's pause for a minute to outline the steps to take during any user-orientated network problem solving process. Make sure that the username and password is being entered correctly. Check the cap locks key. Try to log in yourself from another workstation, assuming that this doesn't violate the security policy. If it works, go back to the user orientated login problems and go through them again. If none of this solves the problem, check the network documentation to find out whether any of the aforementioned kinds of restrictions are in place. If so, find out whether the user has violated any of them. Network connection LED status indicators. The link light is a little light emitting diode LED found on both the network interface card NIC and the switch. It's typically green and labelled link or some abbreviation of that. If you're running 00 base T, a link light indicates that the NIC and the switch are making a logical data link layer connection. If the link lights are lit up on both the workstation's NIC and the switch port to which the workstation is connected, it's usually safe to assume that the workstation and switch are communicating just fine. The power switch. Clearly, to function properly, all computer and network components must be turned on and powered up first. Obvious, yes, but if I had a buck for every time I've heard that my computer is on but my monitor is all dark, I'd be rolling in money by now. When this kind of things happens, just keep your cool and politely ask, is the monitor turned on? After a little pause, the person calling for help will usually say thanks and then hang up ASAP. The reason I said to be nice is that, embarrassing as it is, this or something like it will probably happen to you eventually. Most systems include a power indicator, a power or PWR light. The power switch typically has an on indicator, but the system or device could still be powerless if all the relevant power cables aren't actually plugged in, including the power strip. The best way to go about troubleshooting the power problems is to start with the most obvious device and work your way back to the power service panel. There could be a number of power issues between the device and the service panel, including a bad power cable, bad outlet, bad electrical wire, tripped circuit breaker or blown fuse. Any of these things could be the actual cause for the problem that appears to be a device death instead. Operator error or the problem may be that you've got a user who simply doesn't know how to be one. Maybe you're dealing with someone who doesn't have the tiniest clue about the equipment they're using or about how to perform a certain task correctly. In other words, the problem may be due to someone known as operator error OE. Here's a short list of the most common types of OEs and their associated acronyms. Equipment exceeds operator capability EEOC. Problem exists between chair and keyboard PEBCAK, ID10T error and ID10T. A word of caution here, though assuming that all your problems are user related can quickly make an ID10 error out of you, although it can be really tempting to take the easy way out and blow things off. Remember that the network's well-being and security are ultimately your responsibility. So before you jump to the operator error conclusion, ask the user in question to reproduce the problem in your presence, and they pay close attention to what they do. Understand that doing this can require a great deal of patience, but it's worth your time and effort. If you can prevent someone who doesn't know what they're doing from causing serious harm to pricey devices or leaving a gaping hole in your security, you might even save the help desk's crew sanity from the relentless calls of a user with a bad habit of flipping off the power switch without following proper shutdown procedures. You just wouldn't know. They always do that if they didn't see it for yourself, right? And what about finding out that the pesky user was in fact trained really badly by someone and that they aren't the only one? This is exactly the kind of thing that can turn the best security policy to dust and leave your network and its resources as vulnerable to attack as the goat in Jurassic Park. The moral here is always check out the problem thoroughly. If the problem and its solution aren't immediately clear to you, try the procedure yourself or ask someone else at the workstation to do so. Don't just leave the issue unsettled or make the assumption that it is user error or a chance abnormality, because that's exactly what the bad guys out there are hoping you'll do. So I'm going to leave it here today for this video. If you like listening, please consider like, sharing and subscribing. Thank you.